Hello and welcome to the Private Corporate Counsel Podcast. My name is Tee Persad. I'm a lawyer, mediator, and business consultant at Private Corporate Counsel, a law firm representing small and medium-sized businesses throughout Central Florida and the Florida region in general. Today I want to talk about something that I run into every single day when I'm dealing with issues for clients, even when I'm dealing with personal issues, and that's the issue of negotiation. How do we negotiate effectively? How do we develop a negotiation strategy? What are some of the factors that you consider when dealing with negotiation issues? While some people may default to one or more negotiation style, for example, some may come across as aggressive or manipulative or logical or avoidant or accommodating. There are a number of strategies that can be employed to be effective at negotiation. There are factors that I think are more important than other factors, and these factors can be utilized individually or collectively, but they should all be considered when we are looking at whether or not we're creating an effective negotiation strategy in any given situation, whether we're negotiating with a loved one, negotiating with a customer, negotiating with a vendor, negotiating with co-workers, or negotiating with opposing parties in a contract negotiation or a contract dispute. First, we need to make sure that we're negotiating with a real party in interest. Well, what does that mean? With whom are you negotiating, and for whom are you negotiating? Are you negotiating on your own behalf, on behalf of someone else, on behalf of an organization? The other side, are they negotiating on their own behalf? Or in fact, are they negotiating on behalf of someone else? Are you negotiating with the right party? Not only means whether or not you're negotiating with the people who actually make the decisions, but sometimes the people who are there at the negotiation table are not the people who are actually negotiating with you. For example, an insurance company may send a few adjusters to a mediation session or a negotiation session, and they may have to come back with recommendations to a board of directors or a team or a superior who is actually making the final decision. So in fact, even though those people are in front of you, who you're actually negotiating with are not there at all. Very important to understand who those people are, what their roles are, and what their underlying interests are. So number one, always know who the real party and interests are on both sides of the equation. Next, what are the facts? It's crucial that we have a good understanding of all of the relevant facts regarding the issue. Now, those facts most of the times are pretty obvious, but sometimes they're not as obvious. And the facts include the raw, tangible facts, such as who, where, what, why, when, how, but also what are some of the underlying facts that are not as obvious. For example, the party's intent, the underlying interest, or the emotions that people are experiencing and they're looking for relief from, maybe negative emotions or looking for positive emotions. There are other hidden or unannounced facts that can affect the negotiation process. So it is very important to make a list of what you believe the facts are, not only on your side and how you perceive them, but what the opposing parties see the facts as being and how they perceive those facts as well. So, number two, understand the facts. What are the relevant facts to this negotiation? Next, you want to try to understand the logical reasons for your position and the logical reasons for your opposing party's position. Now, that may seem obvious, and you may say, well, there's only one logic, and my logic is the same as their logic, but that doesn't always necessarily hold true. First, not everyone processes information the same way. Second, not everyone is trained on logic and epistemology. Not everyone understands the framework for thinking logically, analyzing logically, and going through a logical step or process. Some people are trained necessarily in that field as a result of their occupation. For example, lawyers, engineers, mathematicians, but other people are not. And they just have no exposure whatsoever to logical reasoning as a basis for negotiation. So it's important for you to understand your logical reasons and understand the major premise, the minor premise. And it's also important to understand the logical reasons on the other side and their perception of what logical reasoning is. It could be different from yours. So the third step is logical reasoning. Understand the logical reasoning on your end and on their end. Next, there are emotional reasons why people make decisions as well. People sometimes think that all of their decisions are logic-based, but the research is pretty clear, especially over the last 10 years, that all decisions have a component of logic and of emotion. Sometimes the decision is made on an emotional basis, and we try to justify that decision using logical reasoning. And so it's important to understand that the process can include a state of emotional decision-making as well as logical decision-making. So what are the emotional issues relative to the case? Are there emotional reasons why you are requesting what you're requesting, why you are taking the position you're taking, and why you are negotiating the way you're negotiating? And you should run the same analysis on the other side. Sometimes the underlying interests are purely emotional. Sometimes people just want an apology. Sometimes they want acknowledgement. Sometimes they want some relief from the emotional stress and pain that's being caused. Sometimes they just want to have that boulder lifted off of their shoulders, so to speak. Number 4, understand the emotional reasons on both sides. Next, we need to focus on empathy. Now, empathy goes both ways. There are 3 types of empathy. There's emotional or affective empathy, and that emotional or affective empathy is based on the mirroring neurons in all of our brains. Some of us have more mirroring neurons than others. Some of us have an opportunity to develop those mirroring neurons, either because of innate capabilities that we have, or because of environmental factors, such as growing up in a family that's highly empathetic. And so the other one would be cognitive emotion. Now, cognitive emotion can be taught and can be developed. And interestingly enough, when you have a strong practice habit of practicing cognitive emotion, your emotional or affective emotion skills increase as well, and you actually you have a buildup of more mirroring neurons in your brain. So what is empathy? At its core, empathy is really understanding someone else, understanding their experiences, understanding the jobs that they have to do every day, the pains that they experience, the gains that they're looking for, their aspirations and the kind of progress they want to make for themselves and for other people in their culture, in their group, in their tribe collectively, understanding the tribes that they belong to, the culture that they assimilate in and relate to, their belief systems, their values. Once you have a good understanding of that, then you have a good understanding of what people are thinking, what they're experiencing, in their emotion, in their mood, and in the way that they actually experience life every day. And that leads you to a good idea of what they want and what they need. If you can develop the ability to build your cognitive empathy and then also practice that on a regular basis so that your emotional or affective empathy can be built as well, then you will stand a good chance of being able to build and demonstrate empathy for the other side in a negotiation. That's half of the battle. The other half includes something a little bit more tricky, and that is, how do you encourage the other side to have empathy for you and the real party of interest on your side? That's a little bit more complicated, because what you're trying to do there is to personalize yourself and have the other person put themselves in your shoes. Can you get them to understand your jobs and your pains and your gains? Can you get them to understand your aspirations and the progress you want to make for yourself and for your group collectively? Can you get them to understand what it means to be a member of your tribe, to understand your culture, to understand your belief systems and respect them, to understand your values and respect them, to understand what you're thinking, to understand what you are experiencing, to understand what you want and what you need? It is so important for not only you to build your ability to empathize with the other party in a negotiation, but also to encourage them to build the same type of empathy for you. So number 5 would be empathy. How do you build empathy and demonstrate empathy from your side of the negotiation table to theirs, and how do you encourage them to do the same from their side of the negotiation table to yours? Now, next, everyone has a dominant reason as to why they want one thing or the other, why they have the position they have, and why they want what they want out of the negotiation. Now, those dominant reasons can stem from who the real party in interest is, what they perceive the relevant facts to be, their logical reason, their emotional reason, or some other reason that overrides everything else. Now, there will be other reasons, to be sure, but there's always going to be some reason that stands out above and beyond everything else. For example, the underlying need that dominates the negotiation session may well be that someone may want to feel respected. They want to feel appreciated. Another dominant reason could be they need a certain amount of money in order to survive. And so negotiating for a minimum monthly payment is more important than a lump sum amount. It could be that they have a lot of financial obligations and they need a certain amount in order to satisfy those financial obligations to move on with their lives. If you're negotiating for a business, it could be that one employee is extremely critical and you're negotiating to make sure that you keep that employee. Or it could be that a customer is extremely important and the underlying interest is to keep the customer as opposed to letting the customer go, because the lifetime value and the relationship value of that customer is much, much more important than the transactional value. So number 6 would be finding the dominant reason for what you want and the dominant reason for what the opposing side wants. Next, I would think about creativity. Can you be creative in the process so that you can come up with an innovative solution or middle ground or option that no one even thought about while you're going through the negotiation process? And can you encourage and foster that creativity with the other side so that collectively that you're looking at the issues that you're negotiating and you're putting yourself at the same side of the table with the issue on the other side of the table? How can you, as negotiating parties, work together to be creative, to come up with an idea that may not be obvious from the beginning? This can be an exercise in what is called expanding the pie. I'll give you a good example of that. Years ago, I was mediating as a mediator a case between a judgment creditor and a judgment debtor relating to a restaurant that was opened and funded by one party and run and operated by the other party. Sure, they could have just executed on the judgment and forced the bankruptcy, in which event both sides would lose. But after about 8 hours of negotiation during the mediation session, we started to see the creative juices flowing. In that case, the end result was over $1 million in coupons to a new restaurant to be opened by the operators, so that the judgment creditor would have some value for what they've provided, and the operators will have the ability to avoid bankruptcy and maintain their reputation and open another restaurant and facility. And so that was a creative solution that came about as a result of both sides looking at this and trying to identify creative solutions to the issues that they're dealing with and the issues that they were negotiating. So, number 7, creativity, very important in the negotiation process. And then finally, are the underlying interests of the parties the only underlying interest that is important? And I would submit to you that the underlying interest of the parties is very important, but it is also important to consider the interest of people who are not parties to the negotiation process. Is there a public interest? And that public interest can be broad or narrow. For example, if you are negotiating a divorce agreement between two parties and you're representing the husband, someone else is representing the wife, of course we're looking at their individual interest, but we're going to look at the interests of the children as well. Those children are not a party to the dissolution process, but they are affected by it. We may talk about the impact on the in-laws and the cousins and the mutual friends and the workplace colleagues. Those are people who are affected by that process and are in the public domain. And so it's important to always consider the impact of that negotiation on the public at large, including the people closer to the negotiating parties in their circle of influence and beyond that. Now, as we go through that process, we see that there are multiple factors that we need to consider. The real party in interest, the relevant facts, the logical reasoning, the emotional reasoning, the empathy that can be developed and demonstrated, the dominant reason, the reason that involves interest that's beyond the parties, forcing them to be more creative, and then, of course, the public's interest. When you consider all these factors when you're negotiating and you do your homework on each of these and create a deliberate process to actually analyze them, you will find that when you enter the negotiation arena, whether that be a negotiation with someone close to you like a loved one or a negotiation for business purposes, you'll find that you'll be more prepared to negotiate, and the other side will appreciate that preparedness, and you will stand a better chance at getting what you want in that negotiation process and also ensuring that the other side gets some of what they want in the negotiation process. For more information about how to negotiate effectively, please feel free to give us a call at 407-647-7887.
Contact us at 877-647-7887 or email us at info@pcc.law to learn more about the Private Corporate Counsel program and how we can help you and your business on your journey to success.